From folklore and fairies
to monsters and mysteries, it came from the Maritimes.
Emerging from the mist, I'd like to introduce my co-host Evan.
And the thing that goes bump in the night, my co-host, Chelsea.
Welcome to the first episode of It Came From The Maritimes, a podcast discussing Atlantic Canada folklore. Folklore is the passing of stories, customs, and beliefs, often by word of mouth. It helps preserve culture and share history that otherwise would have been lost to time. We'll be sharing stories that we've heard ourselves over the years, or that we've read in local books. Now, these stories might not exactly be the tales you've heard before, but that's the beauty of folklore. The story evolves as each person hears and retells them. We're going to do our best to do these tales justice.
We are a brother and sister from Nova Scotia, and we both moved away for a few years, but were drawn back by the pull of the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Canada provinces might be smaller geographically than the other provinces and territories of Canada, but what they lack in size, they make up for in culture. The region is known for its beautiful coastal landscape, with famous beaches and fantastic seafood. But it's the people that make the Maritimes so special. The people who live here really value their surroundings and traditions.
I was so excited when my brother approached me about starting this podcast. We both love folklore, and I think a lot of that stems because of stories that we heard growing up. We both did a lot of camping in our younger years, and I used to always look forward to overnight trips with the Girl Guides, because as we sat around the bonfire, the older girls would tell the scary stories as the night went on. I would then come home and share them with Evan. Unfortunately, I might have traumatized him a bit. I probably shared the urban legend of Bloody Mary with him when he was too young.
Thanks to Chelsea's retelling of the Bloody Mary story, I am genuinely still pretty weary around mirrors to this day. But Chelsea always loved to share descriptions of horror movies to me when I was too afraid to watch them myself, and even those descriptions were enough to leave me paranoid. I think that my love of folklore might be a little bit more associated with things like Scooby-Doo, where every monster was based in a local myth in whatever fictional town they were in at that time. That was enough fright for me.
Honestly, Scooby-Doo was a great show.
It really is. There's a lot there.
Oh, there really was. So since we're talking a little bit about the monsters, what's your favorite monster if you had to pick one, Evan?
So this is more of a recent one, but my favorite cryptid is the squonk.
I've never heard of that.
So it's a creature from Pennsylvania, from lumberjack myths, and it was often seen by lumberjacks at dusk. It was described as having misfitting skin and being covered in warts. And it was so sad at its ugly appearance that it was always crying. They say it was always seen at dusk because it didn't like to be out in the daytime because it didn't like to be seen.
Oh, the poor little thing.
It is said that if you cornered it, that it would literally dissolve into tears. The thing is so pitiful that I think I just find it really cute. And apparently I'm not the only one, because in Pennsylvania every year, they have a festival called Squonkapalooza.
I feel like we've got to go to Squonkapalooza this year.
I would love to hit up Squonkapalooza. It seems like they enjoy other cryptids too there, but the squonk is the focus.
It's nice to have a well-rounded cryptid event.
Exactly. You don't want to just focus on one thing too much.
That's it. Too many good ones out there.
So, what would you say your favorite monster is?
So overall, I've always been obsessed with a good ghost story. But I think my all-time favorite monster is the Loch Ness Monster. I've always been fascinated by the water, and I loved swimming as a child. But I always felt that little bit uneasy wondering what lurked below the surface. So that's why the idea of water monsters always intrigued me. Honestly, even seeing like a small fish in the water kind of freaked me out. So the thought of there being like some sort of cryptid monster under there definitely had me on edge.
I understand completely. I'm more of a pool swimmer. I like to see the bottom when I'm swimming anywhere, so I don't like any surprises. When I was growing up, anywhere there was a dock, I was certain that there was some sort of, I didn't think a Loch Ness monster, but some sort of aquatic dinosaur, I think, would be waiting under there for me. I remember seeing people swim under docks and being like, oh, they just aren't making it back out of there.
Maybe they didn't.
Never know.
Very true. Would you be more of a skeptic or believer when it comes to this stuff?
I always have a little trouble saying if I'd say a skeptic overall, because I'm not one to just automatically believe things. But there's certain things that you can't realistically fully disprove. Like, especially when you talk about aliens, the universe is so large that, yeah, there's probably something out there. But I also think that a lot of things that people see, there's usually a realistic, real-world thing that's probably the actual explanation. With that being said, while I logically don't believe in the supernatural, a lot of the times if I watch a scary movie, I'm still scurrying up those stairs at night. I'm not waiting down there in the dark, so there must be something in me that really, there's the fear in me even if there's not the belief in me. Would you say that you're a skeptic, or how do you feel?
Well, kind of similar to what you just said. Like, I'm probably more, as much as I've never had any supernatural experiences myself, I want to believe, but it's one of those things I feel like there's so much out there that we can't possibly know. So why couldn't there be ghosts or cryptids, something of the sort? And I find even things that I don't believe in, like the Bloody Mary legend, for example, to come back to that, I don't necessarily believe in it, but am I going to go stand in a dark bathroom, flick the lights 3 times while saying her name in the mirror? Not a chance.
I'm cautious just being in rooms with mirrors with the lights out. I don't want to be testing fate.
I don't blame you.
Now I'd like to briefly go over what we might be covering in future episodes. So we're going to be covering a wide range of stories. Some of them are better known tales, like the Oak Island Mystery and the Shag Harbor UFO sighting. And some of these might be ones that you haven't heard of, like the Lunenburg Werewolf and the Roby Street Witch House.
It's been a lot of fun looking into Atlantic Canada folklore because, of course, there's those kind of more classic tales that people have heard of, whether it was in school growing up or just passed down through stories. But there are so many different tales out there that I feel like a lot of people just aren't aware of. For example, we'll be sharing some maritime ghost stories since Atlantic Canada seems to have its fair share of supernatural tales. And I recently found out, just in researching Nova Scotia folklore, that I have a ghost story from my very own community. So I'd like to share that short ghost story with you today. I've lived on the eastern shore of Nova Scotia since moving back in 2018, and I've fallen in love with the undeveloped wilderness and beautiful beaches out this way. And since I do love the spooky stuff, I was very excited to hear that we have our very own ghost just down the road. Helen Creighton, a famous historian from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, stated in her book Bluenose Magic that perhaps Nova Scotians are particularly sensitive to supernatural experiences because we are a seafaring people, or, if not, at least we have the sea all around us. This quote certainly stands true for those who live in the small fishing community of Seaforth, just a mere 5 minutes down the road from Lawrencetown Beach. People who find themselves in this idyllic coastal town might be rewarded by a sighting of the Grey Lady of Seaforth. The apparition of a woman dressed in a grey dress with long windswept hair can be spotted on overcast days. She is seen either walking through the old graveyard, studying the markings on the stones, or standing on the shoreline, staring out at the harsh waves of the Atlantic Ocean. She has also been spotted floating down the staircase of the original rectory of St. James Anglican Church, built in 1845. She's been seen gliding down the staircase, stopping at the landing each time. A reverend who worked at the Anglican Church claimed that the spirit spoke to him once, asking him to go to a house on Morris Street to deliver a message. The message has been lost over the years, and anyone else who has spotted the ghost says she vanishes as soon as you dare approach. Now, who is the Grey Lady of Seaforth? Locals believe that it's the spirit of a woman named Betty. Betty lived in Seaforth over 120 years ago, and she was employed as the cleaner at the local Anglican church. Betty was married to a fisherman named Jamie, and they were very much so in love. He built her a house by the sea, and she would spend time there eagerly anticipating her husband's return home. One day, she stood on the shore waiting for Jamie, but his ship returned without him. She was told that he had fallen overboard and drowned. Betty couldn't imagine life without her husband, and she couldn't fathom the thought that he hadn't survived. She was so lost in her grief that she stopped speaking, and until her death, she spent her days wandering the shoreline, her hair blowing wildly in the ocean breeze, scouring the horizon for evidence of her lost husband. At night, when it was too dark to look out to sea, Betty would tend to his empty grave site in the local cemetery where a friend had installed a wooden cross. She missed him so much that she would sleep on top of his grave, and one morning she was found dead at the site, having passed away overnight. She was buried in his empty grave, and the locals hoped that it would bring Betty the peace that she had lost in the lonely last years of her life. Although she still walks the shores and hills of Seaforth, unwilling to fully settle without her lost love by her side, we hope that one day she finally sees the spirit of Jamie return from the sea, and they're able to rest peacefully together. So, Evan, have you ever ventured down the road to Seaforth?
I've been in the area, but I've never really spent much time, more of a passing through. So I can't say I've ever seen the Grey Lady of Seaforth.
Right. I find this area, it's such a foggy, kind of moody area that here it's like I'll be driving home on a perfectly sunny day, and I swear you hit my neighborhood and there's a wall of mist. So I can certainly see why it would be the perfect place for a spectre.
Oh yeah, you'd blend right in, really, especially a Grey Lady.
Right. I've never seen the Grey Lady myself, but I always find when I'm driving past that rocky beach in the area, I always take a bit of a look, just you never know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that hopes that I don't see her and that she's just kind of gone to rest.
Well, exactly. I do find a lot of the ghost stories from this area, they seem to involve, just where there is such a big fishing culture, seem to involve people either lost at sea or those who lost their loved ones at sea. But yeah, you can always hope that they find their rest in the end.
Exactly.
Well, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our first episode of It Came From The Maritimes. You'll be able to find us on social media, on Instagram and Facebook at It Came From The Maritimes, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at ICFT Maritimes. And please, if you have any Atlantic Canada folklore you'd like to see covered in future episodes, email us at itcamefromthemaritimes@gmail.com. We might share a few more stories from Nova Scotia just because that's what we've been exposed to over the years, but we'd love to hear more stories from the other Atlantic Canada provinces, and we will be seeking them out as well to include in future episodes. We've decided we'd like to end each episode by sharing a piece of Nova Scotia folklore advice that we found in our reading. Please don't actually take this seriously. It's just supposed to be a little bit of fun. Evan, do you have a folklore tip for us today?
I do. So this one is, if you have someone that's sailing away, don't watch a ship until it's out of sight, or the person you love will never come back.
I think that's very good advice for all of us so we don't meet Betty's fate.
I agree.
Thank you for joining us.